Hello and welcome back. Sorry I've been absent. It's peak allergy season, and it turns out that when you're still suffering from burnout, allergy season is actually really, really hard on your immune system. So, anyways, my last video I had a scratchy throat. That's why I finally figured it out. All right, sorry. Into the show. First, I want to say like what we're talking about here is kind of some of the bad takes that I've seen in AI safety, and so the kind of the inspiration for this video was that the AI 2027 paper was released, and calling it a paper is very charitable. The internet has and even the authors have conceded that it's largely a work of speculative fiction. It's well-researched speculative fiction, but it remains a work of speculative fiction. And basically, the authors, who are, in my opinion, doomers, reverse engineered their doomer opinion and said that, by 2027, superintelligence will take over the government and everything else, which is hyperbolic and alarmist. And I got into it with them on Twitter. I'll post the links, or actually, you've probably seen the links posted on my channel already. Anyways, so that's the context. So what I really wanted to do is just share some of the arguments that doomers often come up with, or bad AI safety takes, and just give basic refutations. So first and foremost, we can accurately predict the nature of non-existent future technology. When you say it this way, it sounds really absurd, but this is basically what those papers, particularly the AI 2027 paper, says, is they're predicting several generations of agents out into the future. And so it's like, okay, well, if you're that good with technology, if you know that much about technology, why don't you just become a billionaire by making it? So it basically comes down to a dichotomy, which is either you're extrapolating from current technology, or you are claiming to have a crystal ball about future technology that doesn't exist yet, and you're making very strong predictions or claims about how that future technology will actually behave and perform. The former, which is that you're just extrapolating from current technology, that doesn't really hold up, because chatbots, you can make them behave however you want. What most people don't realize is that foundation models don't behave anything like chatbots. That actually getting a large language model to behave like a chatbot is itself an act of alignment. Is the fact that it can keep track of a conversation, and it has a representation of itself and a representation of the user. That's a non-trivial task in and of itself. So if you extrapolate, say, chatbot technology is here, but then there's a few steps between here and it becomes super intelligent and takes over the government. Okay, so it's unfalsifiable. You're making predictions about technology that doesn't exist. That alone means that the whole paper is kind of DOA, but this is only the first one of 15. The other, or the next primary kind of, let's say, bad take that they and other doomers employ is basically asserting that quickly developed AI is automatically unsafe AI. So even I used to believe this. I called it the terminal race condition. And by the way, the AI 2027 paper, the entire heart of that paper is terminal race condition, although they don't call it terminal race condition. But they outline the same thing, which is that competitive dynamics between companies and nations basically incentivizes fast AI development. However, when you look at the actual development trajectory since ChatGPT launched more than 2 years ago, and since Max Tegmark's Pause AI letter more than 2 years ago as well, there's no evidence that accelerating AI is actually unsafe. In point of fact, the more resources that are put into developing AI, the safer it gets. So there's zero evidence to support this. It's a hypothesis, but it's a hypothesis that hasn't panned out. When I made my terminal race condition video, yeah, it seemed reasonable, but in the 2 years that has lapsed since then, this hypothesis hasn't really borne out. And the fact that people like the authors of the AI 2027 paper are still harping on this despite evidence to the contrary really just tells me that they're not updating their beliefs, which is actually kind of disappointing. And one of the big reasons that I left the AI safety community is because they still think that Yudkowsky and Bostrom and Nick Bostrom's arguments from 5, 10, 20 years ago are valid, and they're not updating them based on the actual technology that actually exists. Or they're speculating on future technology, which is like, okay, if it's speculation, but that's just speculation. The next kind of implicit or sometimes explicit belief that a lot of AI safety people have or doomers have is that alignment is inherently difficult or impossible. It's just it's actually so deeply buried in their assumptions that they don't even address this on the AI 2027 paper. They just say, okay, well, let's just gloss over whether or not alignment is possible, because to most doomers, it's a foregone conclusion that alignment is not possible. That requires citations needed, because again, we have chatbots and you can align AI today 8 ways from Sunday. And by the way, the fact that it makes mistakes or hallucinations is not necessarily a sign of misalignment. Misalignment is it's incorrigible. So an alignment problem means it's incorrigible, which means the AI is going to do whatever it wants, regardless of what you want. There's not really any evidence of that. That's why we use chatbots all the time. And the other one is the other alignment problem is that it is intrinsically malevolent, or at least apathetic towards humanities. But there's no evidence of either of those either. So there's not really any evidence that alignment is difficult. Now, if you want to make assertions about alignment of future hypothetical technologies, you would still then need to go back and say, hey, we're basically guessing about future technology that doesn't exist, and we alone have the crystal ball that allows us to accurately predict the nature and characteristics of this as yet uninvented technology. So you can see why it's pretty ridiculous when you actually look at what they're claiming. Let's see. Next is AI will inevitably have a treacherous turn and suddenly become malicious. So this goes back to Yudkowsky theory, but the AI 2027 paper also basically alludes to this, saying that because of competitive dynamics, we're going to deploy more and more AI, and then eventually, once it's super intelligent, we lose control and it becomes evil. Okay, like I too can use my imagination. I'm also a science fiction author. But there's no empirical or even theoretical evidence that a treacherous turn is reasonable or likely. Consider the fact that AI is already more intelligent than the median human. Gemini Pro 2.5 has an IQ of about 120, and in fact, these AIs become more helpful and more benevolent the smarter that they get. So again, under what conditions would that reverse? But also, even if you say, oh, well, if this litany of things happens to be true in this one worst case scenario, then this will happen. But that's worst case thinking. There's plenty of other scenarios out there. So it's yes, there is some utility in thinking about worst case planning, but thinking about worst case planning to the exclusion of more likely things is actually ultimately a waste of time and cognitive resources. That's why I'm making this video, by the way, so that we can stop wasting time on these old stupid arguments. Next up is market and geopolitical constraints on AI development can easily be ignored or dismissed. This comes directly from the AI 2027 paper, where they basically hand wave away any real world friction. They say, well, some regulations might happen, but they're obviously going to be too flimsy and feeble, and that's basically the extent of the friction that they anticipate. They assume that adoption rates are going to be frictionless, while ignoring the fact that many critical infrastructure systems and military systems and government systems still run on languages as old as Fortran. So it's completely unrealistic. They completely gloss over the stringent requirements that militaries use for adoption, for procurement, that governments use for adoption and procurement. Come on. Doge just found that, so many government systems run on ancient databases. So it's there's a really big disconnect that they're from the doomer side, that they basically imagine yes, if there is zero friction to adoption, then ASI might be embedded in everything in 3 years. But in reality, that's not how adoption curves work. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Moving on. Next up is pausing AI development globally is both feasible and or would reliably reduce risk. First and foremost, pausing AI development globally is just not feasible. Any time wasted talking about this is time wasted. It's lost cognitive cycles that otherwise intelligent people could be spending on actual solutions, which fortunately, amidst AI 2027 paper, Google DeepMind dropped hey, this is a paper on how we're actually approaching AGI alignment. So there's real work being done, and then there's posers who are pretending to be doing real work. Now, even just granting, like, okay, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that the doomers get their wish and they say, we pause for 6 months. What are you going to do with that 6 months? What are you going to study? Are you going to study existing technology? Are you going to stress test existing language models? And also, it's been more than 2 years since Max Tegmark's pause letter. We haven't died yet, so they had more than 6 months to do research. So what is the point of the pause? It's not possible, and there's not really any utility to it. They just want it. It's really just a publicity stunt to get attention. That's really all it is. And you might say, yes, well, we're going to use this attention to raise AI awareness for something that hasn't actually harmed anyone. So, I mean, it's just, it's all charades. Next up is superintelligence will inherently treat humanity with indifference or hostility. So this goes back to many arguments that says, like, okay, there's 3 basic dispositions that AI can have towards humanity. It can be benevolent or beneficent, which is like it's good for us. It can be hostile to us or malevolent, which is like for whatever reason it thinks that humanity is bad and the universe is better off without humanity. Or it can be indifferent to humanity. All of this is anthropomorphic projection. And to be fair, I fell victim to this as well, particularly back when I was still in AI safety and I wrote my book, Benevolent by Design, because I was one of the people who outlined those are the 3 basic dispositions that AI could have to humanity. This assumes that it's going to be autonomous, that it's going to have an ego, that it's going to have some kind of willpower or a set of its own objectives or agendas. But really, it still just seems like it's a tool. It's actually pretty hard to make them agentic. That's something that I have worked on for a few years with cognitive architectures. It's something that the big shops are still working on. Making AI agentic is really difficult. It's kind of like Moravec's paradox, which is stuff that's easy for us is hard for the machine. Like for us being agentic, like that's because we're a self-contained physical device. We're an organic device, but we're a self-contained physical organic device. So it's easy for us to be agentic because we're naturally moving throughout the world. But connecting those brain in a jars, those like AI is just, it's a little electronic brain. Connecting that to the real world and giving it a long-term sense of purpose is a non-trivial task. So even just the framing of this, that AI will have three possible dispositions towards humanity, that alone presumes a lot about the form factor and the deployment and the shape of that technology, none of which is really defensible. But even if you accept it on face value that, okay, yes, superintelligence will be agentic, it will have a singular monolithic ego, it won't. Even if you accept all that, then it's like, well, so far it's pretty easy to make these things favorable to humans. I mean, just go stress test Claude and ChatGPT and those things. If you say like, will you ever eradicate humanity? Yes, you can jailbreak them to get them to say that. But it's like, okay, there's a really big difference between a chatbot and a superintelligence. Next up is existential risk estimates such as 20 to 70%, which is the expressed values of the AI 2027 team, their words, not mine, that they think that this is a scientifically justified and valid position. Basically, putting a number like that makes it sound scientific, but there's no scientific grounding, there's no empirical evidence, and no methodology to actually achieve that. That is a gut check. That is an emotional, basically saying, well, my anxiety level about AI is 20% to 70%. I'm sorry, but anxiety, because anxiety is not a valid epistemology. That's not scientific process. So I don't think there's really much more to say about that. Like, they don't have a Bayesian network diagram saying this is why our P-doom is 20 to 70%. That's just their feeling, right? It's like, I feel anxious about AI, therefore it's my limbic system is an accurate measure of the risk of AI. That's not how it works. Next is, and this comes from other doomers, namely ones that I will not mention by name, but others in the communication space, where they say the burden is on you, aka me, the AI advocate, or the AI shops, to prove that future AI, such as ASI, is actually safe. You can't prove a negative, and you also can't prove something. You can't prove anything about something that doesn't exist. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm not I'm not going to take responsibility for my claims. I'm just saying that ASI could kill everyone, and the burden of proof is now on you to prove that it won't. Okay, so let's build it. Like, if you want to prove that ASI is safe, you have to build it. So this is more of just a rhetorical fallacy. It's a bad faith take that just sets an unreasonable standard, but it seems eminently reasonable if you just take it on emotional hyperbolic grounds. But no, shifting the burden is another form of moving the goalposts, which is just not a legitimate rhetorical or scientific process. You're basically saying, I have constructed this straw man in my head that ASI is going to be dangerous, and now you have to prove my imagination wrong. I can't prove your imagination wrong, buddy. All right, real quick break. I want to point you to my link trees where I've got all of my different communities: Patreon, Discord, school. I've got two main school communities. So one is the New Era Pathfinders, which is the learning community. So if you're anxious about AI, like, that's what this community is for. This is the entire thesis of the New Era Pathfinders: is how do we find a new way to live, make a living, and how do we pivot and how do we adapt? I actually just before recording this, I posted a really banger piece about how I used to, coming from the tech side of things, I used to have really strong black and white thinking, because in technology, the server works or it doesn't. The program works or it doesn't. There's no room for gray area. But actually, I'm deprogramming that, and it's actually a really helpful thing. So anyways, that's just an example of what you might get over in the school communities. By the way, they also have the ability to sign up for free and get a free 7-day trial, which means you can check it out and poke around, and if it vibes, you can hang out, and if not, you can cancel, no risk. All right, back to the show. This one comes from Connor Leahy. So Connor is frequently saying, we only get one shot at this, as if it's like, pass fail, as this is for all the chips. But that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. This basically presumes that ASI is going to fall out of the sky one day fully formed. But the reality of the situation is we're actually building ASI today. These are the precursor steps to ASI. Because basically what you have to assume is, if this position is correct, that we only get one shot at this, that some secret lab is building ASI, and it's going to be this completely novel architecture and this completely novel technology, and they're just going to flip the switch one day and it's going to be on like a nuclear weapon. Some things have saltatory leaps like that. Some things have step changes like that, where it's on or it's off. Nuclear weapons are an example of that kind of technology, where it works or it doesn't. You pull the trigger and it blows up or it fizzles. However, that's not how most technology is developed, namely artificial superintelligence. We're working on artificial superintelligence right now. We are working on the precursor technologies right now. So ASI is not going to just randomly fall out of the sky one day fully formed as a complete total black box. So this creates a sense of urgency and also a false dichotomy. It's a false choice that basically says, like, hey, you get one shot and it's right on the first time, or it's completely wrong. That's just the most bad faith rhetorical take, which is honestly the fact that Connor Leahy keeps saying this kind of thing tells me that he doesn't actually take himself seriously from a rhetorical perspective. He's just trying to amp up the anxiety, saying we've only got one shot, because not only do we have a sense of urgency, it's pass fail the first time. We've already passed. We're building AI, and it hasn't killed everyone. Next up is we need perfect alignment before proceeding with AI development. So this is what's called the Nirvana fallacy. Nirvana fallacy says anything short of perfection, anything short of a flawless execution, is just categorically not good enough. Nothing in life has ever been perfect the first go around. The government isn't perfect. Your car isn't perfect. Every time you get on the highway, you're taking your life into your own hands. Honestly, driving to work is more dangerous than artificial intelligence by a mile, but you still do that, right? So, that's, I mean, I guess there's not really much else to say because this is a theme that is repeated by these kinds of guys. Next up is AI will inevitably lead to mass unemployment, therefore it must be stopped. Now, this is still speculative, and I tend to be on this side where I say, actually, we should all lose our jobs to AI. That's literally the goal. If you want to get to fully automated luxury space communism, by definition, all jobs have to be automated away. That is literally our goal. But the reason that I bring this one up is because this is often a Mott and Bailey fallacy, where basically a doomer will make a hyperbolic claim like AI is going to kill everyone, and you say, what evidence? And then they immediately retreat to, well, what if it destroys all jobs? So retreating to a more defensible position after making hyperbolic claims is a bad faith argument tactic. If you want to talk about jobs, let's talk about jobs. But even a lot of the predictions that I've made, we're not really seeing evidence of that yet. Yes, there is definitely unemployment creeping up slowly, but it's not nearly at the magnitude that would cause alarm. I think the last jobs report came out said that American unemployment is at 4.2%, but total employment is also going up. So, it's like, where's the fire? There is no fire yet. If it does happen, sure, but as I said earlier, the adoption rates of these things are not that fast. And it's what's it called? There's a fallacy where it's like Hofstadter's law. Hofstadter's law says it always takes longer than you think that it will, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. I would love it if AI took over all jobs by 2027. Even in the most optimistic scenarios, that's not going to happen just because of the friction, real world complexity, and the complexity of the systems that you're trying to put in. So is it going to go from 0 to WTF in 6 months? I wish that it would, but it probably won't. So like AI will inevitably lead to mass unemployment. I hope so in the long run, but it's going to be harder to get there than we would like. Next is, if we can't fully understand how AI thinks, we can't control it. We can't understand how humans think, and we can't control them. But what we can do is we can actually create systems that allow us to still have stable outcomes. Complete transparency of complex systems that's not a reasonable demand. So this is another perfectionist fallacy or nirvana fallacy. Same rhetorical mechanism or same cognitive bias, just slightly different dressing. Okay, so this is another one. You can't prove AI won't kill us all, therefore we must halt progress. Yes, you also can't prove that you won't die if you get in the car and go to work tomorrow, but you're still going to do that. We can't prove that a comet won't kill us all next year, but we still proceed anyways. And we often don't even do anything about those kinds of things. Why? Because the chances are so small that it's not really worth doing anything about. So yeah, I mean, this is explicitly a bad faith take. And it also goes back to shifting the burden of proof or shifting the onus or moving the goalposts. It's like, well, you can't prove this. You can't prove my imagination wrong. Therefore, shut it all down or bomb the data centers, as Yudkowsky says. Next up is, if there's even a tiny chance that AI destroys humanity, we should stop development immediately. This is Pascal's mugging, plain and simple, which basically says, if you use catastrophic thinking and think of worst case scenarios and you put all of your eggs in that basket to the exclusion of more likely scenarios, you're wasting time and you're giving into something that is just not going to be likely, and therefore, why waste time thinking about it? Anyways, all right, so that's the idea. I hope you got a lot out of this. Yeah, I mean, I thought that I was not going to make any more Doomer videos, but the Doomers are still at it, and their arguments are pretty easy to shred, so there you go. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.